Welcome to the Taxing Subjects Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Norton, and today we're joined by two people. Again, in the studio, the Drake Software Vice President of Education, James Stork, and a new guest, the Drake Education Instructor and Tax Team Lead, Amanda Watson. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thanks, Ryan. It's good to be here.
Well, today we're going to be discussing enhancements in Drake Tax, but I just want to point out that we're filming a few days after your team has finished 3 days of classroom training. How did this year go?
We had some really great experiences this year. We had a lot of new clients join us for our classroom training. And the session that we held last week was, of course, early January. And we put that one in there, and it really seems to be very popular with folks that are new and want to get a refresher right before tax season. So we had a good turnout.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also are just wrapping up our update school travel season. And It's been great. We always love getting the opportunity to do the update schools. Our developers always give us really great enhancements that we get to talk about and share with our clients. And it's just a positive experience for us to be able to go get the feedback on what they've been working so hard on, and to be able to go back and say, wow, you got, on these particular things, the customers gave you a standing ovation. And so it's always neat to go out there. We love being with our customers and spending time with them, learning what their needs are, but also sharing all of these great enhancements. And we've got some really cool stuff that they did this year.
Well, kind of piggybacking off of that last point about what gets them excited, before I ask you two what your favorite enhancements are, what are some things that they get really excited about, maybe give that standing ovation for?
A lot of times it's little things that you wouldn't think. We put a lot of work into some of the things that are more technical or complicated, and sometimes it's easy as changing the icon back to the way it was because they were so used to that. So it's really, there's a broad spectrum of things, but when we hit the road with our content, we feel pretty confident that all the stuff we're going to share is going to get positive feedback, because the development team is so good at taking customer feedback at the end of the year and using that to drive their development planning and deciding what they're going to add for the year.
Amanda, what are some things you've heard about?
Well, I agree with James. Sometimes it's the simplest things that they get excited about. Or if we don't change something or leave an existing feature there, sometimes they're really excited about that, because we found that in this industry, a lot of us aren't really fans of change. But when we do make exciting enhancements and new additions to the program, they do get really excited, and it's really nice to be able to bring back that information and let people know this is really a home run. But we also hear suggestions for our current or our new enhancements, and we can bring that back too, like they really like this, but this would make it better. And many times they can just spin on a dime and add that enhancement at the request of our customers, which is the best thing.
Well, now I know in previous years things like look back and link backs have been pretty well received. But let's talk about the new enhancements for the software. Who wants to go first?
All right, so we'll take turns, okay? And I'll go first. I've got some stuff that I'm really excited about, and just some really neat things. The first one is we're calling it expanded data entry search. And so when you're in data entry for a tax return, we have a field that you use to access the different screens that you can get to on the menu rather than using the mouse. So we've used that field in the past to either pull up a screen, or fairly recently we added the ability for you to search and find a screen if you weren't sure where it was, because the menu has been growing. We have tons and tons of screens now. What they did this year is you can put anything in that field, and you can search for it throughout the file. For example, if you're looking for, let's say you have a bunch of rental properties, and the taxpayer came to you and said, I need you to add these expenses to the one that's description Ocean Avenue. You can go into that field and type Ocean Avenue, and it's going to pull up a list of everywhere it finds that, and you can click on it. It takes you directly to that screen. And you can do it for anything. You can do it for, you may have hundreds of assets and you're looking for one particular asset. You may have a bunch of stock transactions, so you have a bunch of 1099Bs, and you're looking for the one for Fidelity. So you can just type Fidelity in, boom, it brings it up. You don't have to go hunt for it. You can click on it, and it takes you directly to that 99B screen. It works for amount fields. So you have a big return and you have an amount coming from somewhere and you're not sure where it is. You just put that amount in and it does the same thing. So it's going to be extremely helpful, especially on your more complex returns that have more data entry, and you're in the middle of the season, you're just like, I just need to find this. I don't want to go hunt for it. So it's a big deal and going to save a lot of time.
That feature got a lot of cheers at our update school. They were very excited about it.
I bet that's a pretty nice efficiency tool.
So what do you got, Amanda?
Well, the first thing on my list is a new worksheet that we've added for our 1040 return series, and it's called the Tax Computation Worksheet. And this worksheet is going to give the tax preparer transparency into how we calculate the tax on the return, or the taxes displaying on the second page of the 1040. I've heard from customers in the past, they'll look at the tax and say, the tax amount's not coming from the tax tables. Where did this amount come from? And we can usually point them to a worksheet where it may have come from: qualified dividends, capital gains. But for Drake 17, we've added the tax computation worksheet that will show them the tax tables if it came from there, or the an alternative calculation from one of those worksheets, the qualified dividend, capital gains. And they're compared side by side. And of course, the lesser amount, which is the most advantageous, of course, anyone wants to take, that will then flow to the tax line. So this tax computation worksheet will be there with the other forms generated with Drake. And it will be a great tool for tax preparers to be able to explain to their clients why they're paying the tax that they are. And this will work on every 1040 return. There are some exceptions if it is a return that doesn't have tax due because the income is too low. Of course, there wouldn't be a need to generate it then. And it is one of the global options in our setup options, so you can turn it on. Or if you don't want to see it, of course, you can turn it off, and then you won't have that generate. But you can force it on a return level. So if there's just one client where you'd like to see that, you can just turn it on and it's there. And I think this is going to be a great tool for our preparers.
All right, James, anything else from you?
All right, so this next one is called the STEX screen. It's STEX, and what we've done is we've created a home base for doing your state and city extensions. And I've got to have the screens here in front of me. There's a lot going on this screen, and I want to make sure I hit everything on it. The first thing that clients will notice at the top of the screen is there's a checkbox that says generate all eligible extensions. And when you check that box, what it's going to do is go through the tax return, what you've already have keyed in, and generate an extension automatically for any state or city that's found on the return. And there's some intelligence built into it. For example, if there's a state that only requires an extension when you're making a payment, then it'll only generate the extension if there's a payment due, based on what's already entered in the return. So that in itself is pretty cool. But there's some other things. There's a checkbox underneath that says generate a $0 extension for anything if necessary. And what that does is if a state either allows or requires you to file an extension, even when there's no payment due, it's going to do the same thing. When you calculate, it's going to run through and find those and generate those extensions so you can make sure that you file those and file them on time. If you move down, then there's a box called reason for extension, and most extension forms will have a place on there where the state or the IRS want some type of an explanation of why the return can't be filed. So if you use this particular field to key that amount in, it's going to carry to all of the extension forms where it's supposed to show up. So rather than going, in the past you would have to go to each extension screen and key that in, you can do it in one place now. On the bottom of the screen is a place where you can override or put in a manual entry for an extension. So let's say there's multiple states on this return and you haven't gotten too far into data entry, so there are some states you haven't even put in. So let's say one of them is Arizona. So you can use one of the drop downs, and there's a bunch of them, so you have plenty of room to add multiple states. You can say, I want an extension for Arizona, and there's even a place right next to it, there's a field to put an estimated payment amount. And there's a worksheet next to each field. So if you don't want to guess at it, if you want to go in and say, here's the tax liability, or here's the estimated tax liability, tax withheld, here's any estimated tax payments that were made, when you exit that worksheet, it'll put that amount, calculate it, and put it right in the field. So there's where you can add states or cities if you need to. And on the right-hand side, we have some places where if a state or city requires more information than just generating based on a checkbox, you can access those directly from the screen. So for example, there's some Ohio cities, the New Hampshire business tax, Alabama privilege tax. There's more required than what we can do on a general screen like this, but you can get to it from this screen. So that's cool. And wait, there's more. There's another tab on this screen. You can see it at the top. It's called Amount Paid with Extension. When you click on that, that screen is going to keep track of all the extensions that you have filed and the calculated amount that we determined what should be paid. Next to those fields, you can key in the amount that was actually paid when it was filed. So let's say an extension for North Carolina was calculated, and we determined you should pay $200, but the taxpayer actually paid $400. So you can use that override field to put that $400 in the amount paid. Then when you check the box next to that field that says, I'm ready to file the regular return, it's going to carry that $400 to the field on the tax form that says what was, you have to tell them what you paid when you filed the extension. So it records it as a payment in the calculation of tax or tax owed. So, and there's a bunch of fields on the screen, so it's going to keep track of those extensions, and when you're ready to file the regular return, you'll go to that tab and check those boxes. It'll carry those amounts over. And the extension stuff, it's one of those things where you only do it one time a year, one time in a very condensed time frame, file extensions. But it's at a time when you don't have a lot of time to go into every return and go to all these different screens. So this is going to make that a lot more streamlined for them and hopefully save them a lot of time in late March, early April when they're trying to get these things filed.
Nice.
That is nice. I think that our clients are really going to like it.
It's like a one-stop shop, as you said, or a nice hub
Right.
for information. All right, Amanda, do you have anything else?
Well, I want to talk about a new calculation that we're going to be performing in Drake 17. And just to give you a little background on that, it relates to the tax benefit rule. Now, and what I think is that a lot of tax preparers aren't really familiar with the tax benefit rule. As a matter of fact, we took some polls at our update schools, and I found that on an average, less than 25% of the preparers at our update schools that were actually familiar with the tax benefit rule. And the tax benefit rule mainly just says that you only need to pay tax on income or a deduction that you receive the benefit of. And specifically, what we're talking about in this case is the state tax or local refund. If you have deducted that in a prior year, of course, you must include that in income in the current year. But the problem that can arise is if the taxpayer is subject to Altman tax or AMT, and things just get a lot more complicated at that point. And one thing about Altman tax, when you make that calculation on your current year return, of course, the state and local refund, there is no deduction allowed for that. So if you have put that on your Schedule A, line 5, and you have a current year state tax refund that will carry to next year to be taxable, there may be a calculation needed to determine if any of your current year state tax refund would be taxable. Sometimes it may all be taxable, sometimes none or a portion of that. So it's a very important calculation that can really save the taxpayer thousands of dollars. So it's something that we really want to make sure that our preparers are doing. So if you have a return that falls into this situation where the taxpayer subject to AMT, they have a current year state tax refund, and they're deducting their state and local tax on Schedule A, line 5, we are going to give the preparers a note that let them know that we have a new calculation to calculate the taxable portion of their state tax refund that should carry forward to next year. And this calculation is not going to affect the current year, in this case, the 2017 tax refund, but it will definitely affect the amount that's going to carry to next year's tax return, which is very important. And this calculation that we're performing is an iterative calculation. Now, iterative calculation is a circular calculation, and it can be very complicated. So if someone were to attempt to calculate this by hand, it would definitely be very time-consuming, and I think they'd probably second-guess themselves a lot as to if they had the calculation correct. So with a few clicks in Drake, we're going to perform this iterative calculation, and this calculation will, again, calculate the taxable portion that should carry forward to next year, and you can see this reflected on a worksheet that we've always had called the carryover worksheet, which gives you items that will carry to next year's return. But we have a new worksheet that will explain how we arrived at that new taxable amount. And as I said, that can really save thousands of dollars. I mean, it may reduce the taxable amount of income by $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000, depending on the tax return, and that can be very important to a taxpayer, therefore very important for our customer, the tax preparer. And we've looked at this calculation and how others are performing it in the industry, and because it is a complicated calculation, I think that Drake Tax is really outperforming this calculation in the industry. We are doing it better than anyone else at any price point. So we are super excited, and we had some really smart people working on this, and we're really happy to have this. So people should watch their notes if they have someone that's subject to AMT.
Yeah, it's a big deal for AMT returns, for sure.
Right, and more people are now subject to AMT, so it is very important.
Well, having an automated calculation where you can actually see the work that was done, so because I know that tax professionals like to go back and double, triple check stuff. Right. That seems like a very valuable tool.
It is, and with this iterative calculation, there's a little bit of an algorithm in there, so it can get very complicated, and Drake is really making it easy, just with a few clicks to perform this calculation.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah. You want my third one?
I do.
All right.
Oh, I do.
So for those clients that prepare either S corporation, partnership, or trust fiduciary returns, and they have a lot of K1s, they're really going to like what we've done there. So, and primarily this is going to help them when they're viewing and printing. And the first thing is when they go to view or print one of these returns now, what we're doing is for all of the K1s, we're organizing it a little bit better. So there'll be a folder for each partner or shareholder or beneficiary, and all of the K1 forms and worksheets for each one of those will be in their K1 folder. So that grouping is definitely a big plus. Also, if a preparer uses sets print mode, one of the things we're doing there is in the same vein, we're taking the forms worksheets for both the federal and the state K1s, and they're all grouped together. So when you print that set, you have everything in order to take out and to be able to send to those partner shareholders or beneficiaries. And another big part of that is in the view mode, when they're looking and they have all these K1s and they're trying to find which partner they may be looking for, we've added the name to the description. It's going to make it really easy for them to find what they're looking for when they have a bunch of them. So that's those are some really neat things. We're also we've added some ability to sort the K1s. We've had some in the program, but we've added the ability to sort by first or last name. So however you key them in, if you want to sort those partners by last name or first name, you can do it. You'll find that on the print screen. It's PRNT, and in data entry on the right-hand side, there's a sort K1s by drop-down field. And when you choose that drop-down, you'll see you can sort by the optional control number. You can sort by the partner's ID number, percentage of ownership, and now by the first or the last name. When these returns that have a lot of K1s on them, these things are going to make it a lot easier for them to wrap up the return, get it printed, and get it sent.
It's fantastic. All right, for your number 3, Amanda.
Well, before I say that, I want to tell you that this was some of our customers' favorite enhancement was the K1. Nice. They cheered, they loved it. It's the simple things that make a huge difference, and that is definitely a time saver.
Yep.
Well, the last thing I want to mention is some changes we've made specifically to the 4562 entry screen, which is our screen we have set up to enter depreciable assets. And if anyone's been using Drake for a while, they'll notice when they look at the 4562 screen changes to fields. And most importantly, what we've changed is how the 4562 screen flows out to other forms, specifically the 4797 and the 6252. We have had some great people spending some time working on streamlining installment sales. So installment sales are so simple to enter now. I don't know if anyone has ever used the word simple when they talked about an installment sale, but it has definitely made the process of entering that much easier. And it's going to tie in together, much less data entry involved, much less transcribing numbers from one place to another. So it's going to be very simple to enter those. And additionally, we've added some worksheets, specifically to a group sale. We've had the group sale function in Drake for several years, but we've enhanced that and we've created some additional worksheets to kind of show you how we have allocated out the sales price among assets and added additional worksheets for installment sales too. And it's just fantastic, all of the numbers that are reported in there, because as you mentioned, tax preparers love their numbers. So these worksheets I think are going to be a definite value add, especially for those returns where you have a lot of assets, or if you're disposing of assets, even if you're just not doing an installment sale but selling those assets. It is just really streamlined, and we're really excited about it. And it's really big changes, and we hope to offer some more in-depth training on how that works as we go along throughout the year. And one thing I want to tell you, and you were the first to hear it, is that I heard a little birdie tell me that we're working on a new feature for our 4562. And we're going to allow our customers to import assets from a spreadsheet, much like the 8949 import. So nice. People have been asking for this for a while. It's not released yet, but we hope to release it soon. But we're actively working and testing that feature. So I really think that those people with a lot of assets are going to be very excited about that. I'm excited about it for sure.
I've read some testimonials where they talk about like 2 inches of paper they have to go through and key in. So I can imagine that would be a welcome change.
Absolutely. Especially those people that are just switching over from Drake and may have their assets tracked on a spreadsheet. They can just import them very seamlessly.
That's a lot to take in. Let's see, we talked about the new expanded data entry, the STEX screen, the tax benefit rule, automatic AMT calculation, and the K1 that's got big cheers. Before we go, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Why don't we do a little talk a little bit about the Tax Act impact form? We know we had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that came in late in 2017. and a lot of the provisions in there impact 2018, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Number one, we have to get our tax planner updated because we allow clients in 2017, while they're filing 2017 tax returns, to use the tax planner to show them potential 2018 scenarios. And we need to be able to show those scenarios based on what we anticipate the 2018 tax law looking like. So there's a lot of work going in on that, but we had, of course, we're getting to the end. We needed to ship right at the beginning of January, but we had clients asking for, is there any way you can generate something with the 2017 tax return that gives us a heads up on what 2018 might look like based on the 2017 tax return, with the new law changes in place. So the developers put their heads down and came up with a worksheet that's called the Tax Act Impact Worksheet. And what it does, you might do a better job explaining it because you've actually talked about it at the
a little bit at length, but we did have a lot of customers that had so many questions about tax reform. How is this going to impact the clients? I know their clients are calling them. But this Tax Act Impact is kind of a forecast, and it has certain items on the return and has a column for 2017 and a 2018 column that's going to show them how the new tax laws will affect this client's return. And that is in there now, and it's live, and it's a great tool to help, of course, forecast what may change. And there is a disclaimer in there, not everything is going to be perfect right now for that, especially as you get into more complex returns. There are a lot more variables, but generally speaking, this is going to be a great way for our tax preparers to show them the difference or the impact that this new tax act will have on the tax return, which I think is a question that a lot of people have. And we will be, of course, answering that question throughout the year as we head into 2018.
That's it for today. We'll see you all in the next Tax and Subjects podcast.